The morning fog clung to the cobblestones of Florence as Lorenzo walked through the narrow streets, his mind heavy with the weight of recent humiliation. 3 days earlier, he had stood before Isabella Medici at her father's estate, stammering through what should have been a confident proposal for a business partnership. Instead of the respect he had hoped to command, he saw only polite dismissal in her eyes, the same look he had grown accustomed to receiving from women of substance throughout his life. What Lorenzo didn't yet understand was that his failure stemmed not from lack of intelligence or ambition, but from a fundamental misunderstanding of power itself. He had spent years trying to impress others while remaining enslaved to his own weaknesses, unaware that true respect, especially from discerning women, comes only to those who have first conquered themselves. This truth, embedded deep within the political philosophy of Niccolo Machiavelli, extends far beyond the realm of statecraft into the most intimate dynamics of human attraction and respect. The prince who cannot govern his own impulses will never effectively govern others, and the man who remains subject to his base nature will never inspire the genuine admiration of women who possess their own strength and wisdom. Part 1. The Fortress of Self-Mastery. The principle that commands instant respect from women begins with a fundamental recognition. Every man carries within himself both a prince and a peasant. The peasant seeks immediate gratification, avoids discomfort, makes excuses, and surrenders to weakness at the first sign of resistance. The prince, however, understands that true power requires the systematic destruction of these inferior impulses, replacing them with disciplined strength that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. Machiavelli observed that everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. This observation reveals the first layer of the principle. Most men live their entire lives as actors playing the role of strength while remaining fundamentally weak beneath the surface. Women, particularly those of intelligence and experience, possess an almost supernatural ability to sense this discrepancy between appearance and reality. They can detect the tremor in a voice that betrays insecurity, the slight hesitation that reveals self-doubt, and the desperate need for validation that drives so many masculine displays. When Lorenzo finally began to understand this principle, it was through observing Marcus, a merchant who had recently arrived in Florence from the northern territories. Marcus possessed neither exceptional wealth nor remarkable physical beauty, yet Isabella Medici, the same woman who had dismissed Lorenzo so readily, sought out Marcus's counsel on matters of business and seemed genuinely engaged by his presence at social gatherings. The difference between the two men became apparent when Lorenzo witnessed Marcus handling a situation that would have devastated his own confidence. A rival merchant publicly challenged Marcus's pricing strategies, suggesting they were underhanded and designed to deceive customers. Rather than becoming defensive or angry, Marcus listened carefully to the accusation, acknowledged the parts that contained truth, corrected the misconceptions with calm precision, and then proceeded to explain his actual business philosophy with such clarity that even his accuser seemed impressed by the response. What Lorenzo observed in that moment was the practical application of self-mastery. Marcus had long ago destroyed the weak parts of himself that needed to be right in every situation, that required constant validation, and that responded to criticism with emotional reactivity. In their place, he had cultivated a fortress of inner strength that allowed him to respond to challenges with the calm confidence of someone who knew precisely who he was and what he stood for. This transformation, the destruction of one's weak self, requires a systematic approach that Machiavelli would have recognized as similar to the political reforms necessary to transform a chaotic principality into a stable state. It begins with honest assessment of one's current weaknesses, continues with the implementation of disciplines designed to strengthen areas of vulnerability, and culminates in the development of an unshakable internal foundation that cannot be disturbed by external events. The weak self manifests in countless ways. The desperate need to be liked, the tendency to seek validation through material displays, the habit of making excuses when faced with failure. Each of these weaknesses represents a point of vulnerability that others can exploit, and women particularly seem to instinctively test for these weaknesses in their interactions with men. Lorenzo began his own transformation by implementing what he called the daily destruction, a systematic process of identifying and eliminating one weakness each month. His first target was his compulsive need to fill silence with nervous chatter. He had noticed that whenever conversations reached natural pauses, especially with women, he would immediately begin speaking to avoid the discomfort of quiet moments. This habit revealed his fear of being judged negatively and his lack of confidence in his own worth. For 30 days, Lorenzo practiced sitting with silence. During conversations, he forced himself to pause before responding, to allow natural breaks in dialogue, and to become comfortable with the space between words. Initially, this felt terrifying. His weak self screamed that people would think him stupid or uninteresting. But as the days passed, he began to notice something remarkable. People seemed more engaged with him, not less. Women particularly seemed to appreciate the sense that he was actually listening to them rather than simply waiting for his turn to speak. This first small victory revealed a crucial truth about the destruction of weakness. Each conquered weakness creates space for the development of a corresponding strength. By destroying his compulsive chatter, Lorenzo had unconsciously developed the power of presence, the ability to be fully engaged in the moment without needing to perform or prove himself. The process of self-mastery also requires what Machiavelli called the necessity of appearing mercy while being cruel to one's enemies. In the context of personal development, this translates to being ruthlessly disciplined with oneself while maintaining compassion for others. The man who seeks to command respect must learn to be his own harshest critic and most demanding taskmaster, while simultaneously extending grace and understanding to those around him. Marcus demonstrated this principle in his business dealings. Lorenzo observed him maintaining strict personal standards that he never compromised, always arriving precisely on time, always completing exactly what he promised, always speaking with careful consideration. Yet when others failed to meet similar standards, Marcus responded with patient guidance rather than harsh judgment. This combination of personal discipline and interpersonal grace created a magnetic effect that drew people to seek his leadership and counsel. Women, Lorenzo began to realize, are naturally attracted to this combination because it signals both competence and stability. A man who is strict with himself but compassionate with others demonstrates that he can be trusted with power, that he will not abuse authority when he obtains it, and that he possesses the emotional regulation necessary for long-term partnership and success. The fortress of self-mastery also requires the development of what might be called emotional invincibility, the capacity to maintain inner equilibrium regardless of external circumstances. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless or unresponsive, but rather developing such a strong internal foundation that temporary setbacks, criticisms, or disappointments cannot shake one's fundamental sense of self-worth and direction. Lorenzo's greatest test of this principle came 6 months into his transformation. Isabella Medici's father announced a competition among local merchants for a significant contract that would establish the winner as the primary supplier for several major construction projects throughout Tuscany. Lorenzo had spent months preparing his proposal, confident that his improved self-discipline and growing business acumen would serve him well. On the day of the presentation, however, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. His carefully prepared materials were damaged by an unexpected rainstorm, forcing him to improvise his presentation. 2 of his key references were unavailable due to illness, weakening his credibility. Most devastating of all, he discovered that his primary competitor had somehow obtained advanced knowledge of his pricing strategy and had undercut him significantly. The old Lorenzo would have crumbled under these circumstances. He would have made excuses, blamed others for the setbacks, and likely would have delivered a defensive, apologetic presentation that confirmed everyone's doubts about his capabilities. The new Lorenzo, however, drew upon the months of systematic weakness destruction he had undergone. Standing before the selection committee, including Isabella herself, Lorenzo began his presentation by calmly acknowledging the obstacles he had faced. Rather than making excuses, he explained how these challenges had actually clarified his thinking about the project and had led him to a more innovative approach than his original plan. He spoke about his competitor's pricing strategy not with bitterness but with genuine admiration, then proceeded to explain why his higher prices reflected long-term value that would ultimately save money and deliver superior results. Most importantly, throughout the entire presentation, Lorenzo maintained the calm confidence of someone who knew that his worth was not determined by whether he won this particular contract. His self-mastery had progressed to the point where external validation, while appreciated, was no longer necessary for his sense of identity and purpose. The result surprised everyone, including Lorenzo himself. Not only did he win the contract, but Isabella approached him afterward to express her admiration for how he had handled the adverse circumstances. "I have seen many men crumble when faced with far less challenging situations," she told him. "Your composure under pressure suggests strength of character that goes far beyond business competency." This interaction revealed another crucial aspect of the principle. Women of quality are constantly evaluating men for their potential as long-term partners, leaders, and allies. They instinctively test for the kind of inner strength that will remain stable through life's inevitable challenges. The man who has systematically destroyed his weak self passes these tests naturally, not because he is performing strength, but because he has actually developed it. Like the political structures Machiavelli analyzed, personal strength must be continually renewed or it will gradually decay. This means establishing daily practices, weekly assessments, and monthly challenges that prevent complacency and ensure continued growth. Lorenzo developed what he called the Prince's Daily Review, a brief evening practice where he honestly assessed his actions and thoughts throughout the day. He asked himself 3 questions. Where did I act from strength rather than weakness today? Where did I allow my inferior impulses to control my behavior? What specific action will I take tomorrow to continue strengthening my character? This practice prevented the gradual drift back into old patterns that derails most attempts at self-improvement. By maintaining constant awareness of his internal state and consistently choosing the stronger response to life's challenges, Lorenzo was able to build and maintain the kind of inner fortress that commands natural respect from others. The transformation from weakness to strength also changes how a man moves through the world. His posture becomes more upright, his voice more resonant, his gaze more direct. These physical changes are not conscious performances but natural expressions of increased inner confidence. Women notice these subtle shifts immediately because they indicate fundamental changes in character rather than superficial attempts at improvement. More importantly, the man who has destroyed his weak self develops what Machiavelli called virtue, a combination of skill, courage, and moral excellence that enables effective action in the world. This quality makes him genuinely valuable to others, not because he is trying to impress them, but because he has developed capabilities that can benefit everyone around him. Women of substance are naturally drawn to such men because partnership with them offers mutual benefit rather than the burden of supporting someone who remains fundamentally weak. Part 2. The Art of Strategic Detachment. The second principle that commands instant respect from women emerges directly from the first. Once a man has destroyed his weak self, he must learn to practice strategic detachment from outcomes while remaining fully engaged in the process of achievement. This paradoxical approach, caring deeply about excellence while remaining unattached to specific results, creates a magnetic quality that women find almost irresistible. Machiavelli understood that fortune is the arbiter of half our actions, but she still leaves the control of the other half to us. This wisdom applies perfectly to romantic and social dynamics. The man who becomes desperate for any particular outcome, whether it's winning a specific woman's affection, obtaining a particular job, or achieving a certain social status, actually decreases his likelihood of success because desperation repels the very people and opportunities he seeks to attract. Lorenzo discovered this principle through painful experience. After his successful contract presentation, he had developed romantic feelings for Isabella and began pursuing her with the focused intensity that had served him well in business. He sent thoughtful gifts, arranged convenient encounters, and made his interest increasingly obvious. Rather than responding positively to these gestures, Isabella began to seem more distant and formal in their interactions. The breakthrough came when Lorenzo observed how Marcus had won the affections of Francesca, a merchant's daughter who had previously shown no interest in any of the men pursuing her. Marcus's approach was entirely different from the typical masculine strategy of direct pursuit and obvious intention. Instead, he seemed genuinely interested in Francesca as a person, engaging her in conversations about subjects that fascinated her, seeking her opinions on matters where her judgment was valuable, and treating her with the same respectful attention he gave to anyone whose company he enjoyed. What made Marcus's approach so effective was its authenticity. He wasn't performing interest in Francesca's thoughts and feelings as a strategy to win her affection. He had genuinely developed the capacity to find people interesting for their own sake, independent of what they might provide for him. This ability stemmed from his strong sense of self-worth. He didn't need Francesca's love to feel complete, so he could appreciate her qualities without the distortion of desperate need. Lorenzo realized that his pursuit of Isabella had been corrupted by the very weaknesses he thought he had overcome. His interest in her had become possessive rather than appreciative, focused on what her affection would do for his ego rather than on genuine compatibility and mutual benefit. He was still operating from a position of internal scarcity, acting as if Isabella represented his only opportunity for happiness rather than one of many possible paths to fulfillment. The practice of strategic detachment requires a fundamental shift in perspective about success and failure. Instead of viewing specific outcomes as make or break determinants of self-worth, The strategically detached man sees each situation as an opportunity to express his developed character and capabilities. He gives his best effort not because the outcome will define him, but because excellence is simply his natural mode of operation. This shift had immediate effects on Lorenzo's interactions with women. When he stopped needing Isabella's approval to feel good about himself, he naturally began treating her with the same comfortable confidence he showed to everyone else. He could disagree with her opinions without fear of losing her favor, share his genuine thoughts without calculating their effect on her attraction, and engage with her interests without performing enthusiasm he didn't feel. The paradoxical result was that Isabella began showing more interest in him than she had when he was actively pursuing her. The psychological explanation is straightforward. People are naturally drawn to those who seem complete in themselves rather than those who need something from them to feel whole. When Lorenzo stopped broadcasting his need for Isabella's validation, he began projecting the kind of self-sufficiency that confident women find attractive. Strategic detachment also requires developing what might be called abundance mentality, the genuine belief that opportunities, relationships, and successes are plentiful rather than scarce. This mentality cannot be faked through positive thinking or affirmations. It must be built through actual experience of creating value and attracting opportunities. Lorenzo began cultivating abundance mentality by systematically expanding his skills, relationships, and interests. He studied languages, developed expertise in new areas of commerce, built friendships with people from different social circles, and pursued activities that genuinely interested him regardless of their social or romantic implications. As his life became richer and more varied, he naturally began to feel less dependent on any single opportunity or relationship for his happiness. This internal shift created external changes that others noticed immediately. Lorenzo stopped seeming needy or desperate in any context because he genuinely wasn't. His conversations became more relaxed and engaging because he wasn't calculating their strategic value. His business negotiations became more effective because he could walk away from unfavorable terms without feeling like he was losing his only chance for success. Women began responding to him differently because he was no longer subtly communicating that he needed their approval to feel valuable. Instead, he projected the quiet confidence of someone who knew he could create opportunities and build relationships wherever he went. This quality is incredibly attractive to women of substance because it suggests that partnership with such a man would be based on choice rather than mutual desperation. The art of strategic detachment also involves mastering the balance between pursuit and retreat. Machiavelli observed that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel. In romantic contexts, this means that what people observe about your character matters more than your direct expressions of interest or affection. Marcus demonstrated this principle in his courtship of Francesca. Rather than constantly expressing his growing feelings for her, he allowed his character to speak through his actions. When Francesca faced a challenging situation with a dishonest supplier, Marcus offered practical assistance without making it about their relationship. When she expressed interest in learning about trade routes, he shared his knowledge generously without expecting romantic reciprocation. His consistency, reliability, and genuine care for her welfare communicated his feelings more powerfully than declarations of love would have. Lorenzo learned to apply this approach by focusing on being the kind of man that Isabella, or any woman of quality, would naturally want to be around, rather than trying to convince her to like him. He worked on developing qualities that were valuable independent of romantic context. Becoming a better conversationalist, expanding his cultural knowledge, improving his physical fitness, developing his sense of humor, and cultivating the kind of emotional stability that made others feel comfortable in his presence. This approach requires patience and faith in the natural process of attraction. Instead of trying to force romantic outcomes through persuasion or manipulation, the strategically detached man trusts that genuine compatibility will create natural connection over time. He doesn't need to rush or push because he isn't operating from a position of scarcity or desperation. The strategic detachment principle also applies to handling rejection and setbacks. When Lorenzo was finally ready to express his feelings to Isabella more directly, she gently but clearly indicated that she saw him as a valued friend, but didn't feel romantic chemistry between them. The old Lorenzo would have been devastated by this response, seeing it as a fundamental rejection of his worth as a man. The new Lorenzo, however, had developed sufficient strategic detachment to receive this information without losing his emotional equilibrium. He thanked Isabella for her honesty, expressed genuine appreciation for their friendship, and continued treating her with the same warm respect he always had. Most importantly, he didn't try to change her mind, argue with her feelings, or withdraw from the friendship in wounded pride. This mature response had several unexpected consequences. First, Isabella's respect for Lorenzo actually increased because she saw that he could handle disappointment with grace and dignity. Second, she began introducing him to other women in her social circle, knowing that he was the kind of man who could be trusted to treat women well. Third, Lorenzo's confidence actually grew because he had proved to himself that he could face rejection without being destroyed by it. Within 6 months, Lorenzo had begun a relationship with Beatrice, a woman from Isabella's circle who appreciated the very qualities that made him attractive: his emotional stability, his genuine interest in others, his ability to maintain his own identity within a relationship, and his demonstrated capacity for handling life's challenges with equanimity. The relationship with Beatrice flourished precisely because it was built on a foundation of strategic detachment. Neither partner needed the other to feel complete, so they could appreciate each other's qualities without the distortion of desperate dependency. They could disagree without fear of losing the relationship, pursue individual interests without jealousy, and support each other's growth without trying to control or possess. Strategic detachment also creates space for genuine intimacy to develop. When people don't feel pressured to provide validation or meet desperate needs, they can relax and reveal their authentic selves. This creates the kind of deep connection that desperate pursuit actually prevents. The man who needs a woman's love to feel worthy will never experience the profound satisfaction of being loved for who he actually is, because his neediness prevents her from seeing his true character. The mastery of strategic detachment requires ongoing practice and refinement. It's easy to slip back into attachment and desperation when facing particularly attractive opportunities or challenging setbacks. Lorenzo developed daily practices to maintain his detachment: meditation to cultivate inner peace, physical exercise to burn off anxiety, creative pursuits to maintain a sense of personal fulfillment, and regular social activities to ensure he never became too dependent on any single relationship or opportunity. Perhaps most importantly, strategic detachment must be balanced with genuine engagement and care. The goal is not to become cold or indifferent, but rather to care deeply about people and pursuits while maintaining the emotional freedom that comes from not needing any specific outcome to occur. This balance creates the magnetic combination of warmth and independence that commands respect from everyone, especially women who have experienced the suffocating effects of desperate attachment in previous relationships. Part 3. The manifestation of natural authority. The final principle that commands instant respect from women is the natural manifestation of authority that emerges when a man has systematically destroyed his weaknesses and mastered strategic detachment. This authority is not forced or performed, but flows naturally from inner strength and manifests in every aspect of how he moves through the world. Machiavelli understood that true authority cannot be granted by others. It must be developed internally and demonstrated through consistent action. The distinction between natural authority and artificial dominance is crucial. Many men attempt to command respect through displays of aggression, wealth, or social status, external markers that can be easily stripped away by changing circumstances. Natural authority, however, stems from character qualities that remain stable regardless of external conditions. Integrity, competence, emotional regulation, and the ability to make difficult decisions based on principle rather than convenience. Lorenzo's transformation reached completion when he faced the greatest challenge of his career. The successful contract he had won months earlier encountered serious complications when political tensions between Florence and neighboring territories threatened to disrupt trade routes essential to the project. Several other merchants involved in the consortium began pressuring Lorenzo to cut costs and quality to protect their profit margins, even if it meant delivering substandard results to their clients. The situation required the kind of leadership that separates men of genuine authority from those who merely hold positions of responsibility. Lorenzo could have chosen the path of least resistance, compromising his standards to keep peace within the group and ensure short-term profits. This approach would have been financially safer and socially easier, requiring no courage or difficult decisions. Instead, Lorenzo drew upon the foundation of character he had spent months building. He called a meeting of all consortium members and clearly explained why maintaining quality standards was essential, not just for their current project, but for their long-term reputations and future opportunities. He acknowledged the financial pressures they were all facing, but presented a detailed alternative plan that would maintain quality while minimizing additional costs through improved efficiency and strategic supplier relationships. When some members continued to resist, Lorenzo made a decision that demonstrated natural authority at its highest level. He calmly informed the group that he would rather withdraw from the project entirely than deliver work that fell below his standards. He wasn't threatening or manipulative. He simply stated his position as a matter of principle and gave others the freedom to make their own choices. This response had immediate and profound effects. Rather than calling his bluff or accepting his withdrawal, the other merchants began to see the situation through his perspective. If Lorenzo was willing to sacrifice significant financial gain to maintain his standards, perhaps those standards were more important than they had initially realized. His willingness to accept financial loss rather than compromise his integrity gave his arguments a credibility that no amount of persuasion could have achieved. Isabella, who had been observing these developments through her father's business connections, later told Lorenzo that this incident had fundamentally changed how she saw him. "I realized that night that I had been thinking of you as someone trying to become successful, when in fact you had already become the kind of man who could be trusted with success," she said. "That's a much rarer quality than I had understood. Natural authority manifests in countless small ways that women notice and appreciate. It appears in how a man handles service staff, treating them with respect while maintaining clear expectations. It shows in his response to unexpected problems, remaining calm and solution-focused rather than becoming angry or overwhelmed. It's evident in his financial decisions, spending money purposefully rather than impulsively, and being generous without being wasteful." Lorenzo noticed that as his natural authority developed, women began seeking his opinion on matters that had nothing to do with business or romance. Beatrice asked for his perspective on family conflicts. Isabella consulted him about investment decisions, and even women he barely knew seemed drawn to request his advice on various challenges they were facing. This happened not because he was trying to position himself as an authority figure, but because his demonstrated character made others trust his judgment. Development of natural authority also changes how conflicts are handled. The man who possesses genuine inner strength doesn't need to win every argument or prove himself right in every situation. He can acknowledge when others have valid points, admit his own mistakes without losing credibility, and focus on finding solutions rather than assigning blame. This mature approach to conflict resolution is particularly attractive to women, because it demonstrates emotional intelligence and the kind of wisdom that makes long-term partnerships sustainable. Women have experienced enough men who turn every disagreement into a battle for dominance to recognize and appreciate those rare individuals who can disagree without becoming disagreeable. Lorenzo's relationship with Beatrice deepened significantly when they faced their first serious conflict. She had made financial commitments for a family celebration without consulting him, assuming he would support decisions that affected their shared resources. In his pre-transformation days, Lorenzo would have either exploded in anger or passively accepted the situation while harboring resentment. Instead, he approached the situation as an opportunity to strengthen their relationship through honest communication. He explained his concerns about the financial implications and the importance of mutual consultation on significant decisions. He listened carefully to her perspective about family obligations and the pressures she had been feeling. Together, they developed agreements about financial decision-making that respected both of their values and concerns. Beatrice later told him that this conversation had been a turning point in her feelings for him. "I realized I was with a man who could handle problems like a partner rather than like a competitor or a child," she said. "That's when I knew I wanted to build a life with you." National authority also involves the ability to make difficult decisions and accept their consequences without complaint or self-pity. Life regularly presents situations where all available options have significant disadvantages, and the quality of leadership is revealed in how such decisions are made and implemented. Lorenzo faced such a situation when economic pressures forced him to reduce his workforce by nearly half. He could have handled the situation by making arbitrary cuts, blaming external circumstances, or trying to avoid personal responsibility for the decisions. Instead, he spent weeks carefully evaluating each employee's circumstances and contributions, developing the most fair and supportive transition plan possible, and personally delivering the difficult news to each affected individual. The process was emotionally exhausting and financially costly. Lorenzo provided more generous severance packages than strictly necessary and spent considerable time helping displaced workers find new opportunities. However, the way he handled this crisis enhanced rather than damaged his reputation. Word spread throughout Florence's business community that Lorenzo was the kind of leader who took care of his people even when it cost him personally. This reputation had unexpected benefits. Several talented individuals approached Lorenzo about working with him, even at lower wages than they could earn elsewhere, because they valued working for someone they could trust and respect. Women throughout his social circle took notice of how he had handled the situation, recognizing the kind of character that such behavior indicated. The manifestation of natural authority requires accepting full responsibility for one's life circumstances and outcomes. This doesn't mean taking blame for things genuinely beyond one's control, but rather focusing on how to respond effectively to whatever situations arise rather than wasting energy on complaint or blame. When Lorenzo's primary warehouse was damaged by fire, destroying significant inventory just before his busiest trading season, he faced the choice between self-pity and constructive action. The loss was genuinely devastating and could have ended his business entirely. For one day, Lorenzo allowed himself to feel the full weight of disappointment and fear. Then he channeled that energy into developing and implementing a recovery plan. Working 18-hour days for 3 weeks, Lorenzo negotiated emergency inventory arrangements with suppliers, found temporary warehouse space, communicated honestly with clients about delays and adjusted delivery schedules, and personally oversaw every detail of the recovery operation. His calm competence during this crisis impressed everyone who observed it, including several women who had previously seen him only as a social acquaintance. Beatrice later said that watching Lorenzo handle this crisis had convinced her that he was someone she could rely on through any difficulty life might present. "I saw that you didn't just talk about being strong. You actually were strong when it mattered," she told him. This quality of demonstrated reliability under pressure is perhaps the most attractive characteristic a man can possess from the perspective of women who are evaluating long-term partnership potential. Natural authority also involves the wisdom to know when to lead and when to follow, when to speak and when to listen, when to act and when to wait. This sophisticated understanding of social dynamics comes from the self-awareness that develops through systematic character building rather than from trying to memorize social strategies or manipulation techniques. In his relationship with Beatrice, Lorenzo learned to appreciate her superior knowledge and judgment in areas where she had more experience or natural talent. Rather than feeling threatened by her competence, he found genuine pleasure in supporting her success and learning from her expertise. This comfort with his partner's strength actually increased her attraction to him, because it demonstrated genuine confidence rather than the fragile ego that requires constant validation. The final manifestation of natural authority is the ability to inspire others to become their best selves rather than trying to control or diminish them. The truly authoritative man creates an environment where others feel safe to be authentic, encouraged to pursue their goals, and supported in their growth. This quality makes him naturally attractive to strong, ambitious women who have experienced too many men who felt threatened by feminine strength and competence. Lorenzo discovered this principle when he began mentoring younger merchants who sought his guidance. Rather than hoarding knowledge to maintain competitive advantage, he shared his experience generously and took genuine pleasure in seeing others succeed. This approach created a network of grateful allies and established his reputation as someone who lifted others up rather than stepping on them to advance himself. Women noticed this quality and found it deeply attractive because it indicated the kind of character that would support their own growth and success rather than trying to limit it out of insecurity or jealousy. Beatrice often mentioned how much she appreciated Lorenzo's encouragement of her own business interests and his pride in her accomplishments. The complete transformation from weakness to natural authority takes time, consistency, and genuine commitment to character development over social strategy. It cannot be faked or performed successfully because its power lies in the authentic strength it represents. Women possess sophisticated ability to distinguish between genuine authority and its imitations, and they respond only to the authentic version. Lorenzo's journey from stammering insecurity to natural authority took nearly 2 years of consistent effort. The process required daily discipline, monthly assessment of progress, and the humility to continue learning and growing even after achieving significant success. Most importantly, it required viewing the development of character as an end in itself rather than merely a means to attract women or gain social status. The man who successfully completes this transformation discovers that commanding respect from women is merely one benefit of becoming genuinely worthy of respect. His improved relationships with women flow naturally from his improved relationship with himself and his enhanced capacity to create value in every area of life. He attracts high-quality partners not because he has learned to manipulate attraction, but because he has become the kind of person that high-quality individuals naturally want to be around. The principle that Machiavelli understood about political power applies equally to personal magnetism. True authority cannot be given or taken away by others because it emerges from internal qualities that remain stable regardless of external circumstances. The man who has destroyed his weak self, mastered strategic detachment, and developed natural authority becomes genuinely attractive to women of substance because he has become genuinely valuable as a human being. This transformation creates what might be called effortless attraction, the quality of drawing positive attention and respect without trying to do so. Women notice such men not because they are performing attractiveness, but because authentic strength and character are naturally magnetic. The confident woman recognizes in such a man the possibility of genuine partnership with someone who will enhance rather than diminish her life. Lorenzo's story concludes with his marriage to Beatrice, but more importantly with his continued commitment to the principles that had transformed his life. He understood that the qualities that had won her respect and love were the same qualities that would maintain their relationship and create success in every other area of his life. The destruction of his weak self had been not an end but a beginning, the foundation for a life of genuine achievement and meaningful relationships built on character rather than strategy, substance rather than appearance, and authentic strength rather than performed dominance. The Machiavellian principle that commands instant respect from women is ultimately about becoming worthy of that respect through systematic character development. It offers no shortcuts or manipulation techniques because it recognizes that genuine attraction operates on a deeper level than social strategy can reach. The man who truly embodies this principle discovers that earning women's respect becomes natural and effortless because he has earned his own respect first, and everything else flows from that fundamental achievement.